And I'm just like, okay, Jesus, I know I pray this, but can you just loosen up a little bit?
Let me do my thing.
Let me do my thing. I need to do this audition. Now in this place where the Lord is like chipping at that. He's like, this is presentational. And he's like, let's be real.
Take the mask off.
Take the mask off. You know, let's be real. Even in preparation to move to California, a question that the Lord kept asking me was, do you believe that my word is enough? Because the audition was in Chicago. On the flight to Chicago, I was literally just learning my monologue. And I remember thinking, Lord, if this is really where you're sending me to, let your marker be your presence. And I remember in that moment saying that prayer and thinking, those are not even words that I use. It was almost like Jesus praying through me.
Hi, Tori.
Hi, Caleb.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm so excited that you're here.
Yeah.
And that we're going to have this conversation. Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. I've been so excited for this moment all week. So thank you for having me.
I've really been looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Just knowing you as a friend and all the deep conversations that we've had, I just know you have a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
So I'm really excited for this.
Yeah.
Rather than dumping a bio on people, tell me a little bit about like your background, where you grew up, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's important for people to know about you?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. So I was born in Nigeria, moved to Kuwait when I was 2.5. I grew up being a pastor's kid. So it was, and also, I don't know if people listening or people watching know much about Nigerian parents, but my mom didn't play about Jesus, you know, so we would wake up early in the morning to worship, to prayer. And honestly, growing up in a society like that, it was instilled in me that you had to be on fire for Jesus. And that's something my mom would always say to us. She's like, you can't be lukewarm because he's going to spit you out. So you better be on fire for Jesus. And my sister and I make jokes about that constantly. But that is a kind of household that I grew up in. I did all my education in Kuwait, so speak the language, speak Arabic. Did undergrad there, and my last few years in Kuwait, I was also a journalist. I had my own TV show that I hosted, did a lot of radio broadcasting as well. So that is a little bit of my background, and then moved to the States through various miracles that the Lord had to just bring about for me to get here. And I'm currently now an actor on a CBS show called Bob Hearts. And doing that and doing a bunch of voiceover work.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, now having been to Africa myself, like, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, it is just...
We don't play.
You do not play. And you have fun. Well, you guys have fun, too.
Yes.
It's just, I was overwhelmed by just the sense of joy that was... I mean, you go from... There's this whiplash of industry and wealth, and then right next to you're just destitute poverty. But like even inside of that, in places and stuff like that, like the people are thankful for what they have.
Yeah.
And so that really struck me visiting there. What brought you, like what was kind of the catalyst? What brought you from the place where you grew up to here and kind of to Hollywood, to the industry as a whole? What did that look like for you?
You know, growing up as a child, and this is something that not a lot of people know about me, I had what was called anxiety-induced mutism. So I would get incredibly anxious in public spaces that nothing would come out. Even when people would ask me my name, I would get so anxious that I wasn't able to speak. But something was significant. As a child, from the age of 5, I would have this recurring dream. And in this dream, I would be in this beautiful dress on stage and I'd be performing. And I remember every time I'd wake up from that dream, I would think to myself, that is surely me as an adult, but how am I ever going to get to this place when I can't even speak outside of my house? You know, so I had that in the back of my mind. And I remember, I think it was around the 7th grade, I was introduced to drama. My mom had moved us to a private British school, and we had drama on our timetable. And I remember thinking, what is this? What is drama? Sounds fun. And I go into class, first day of class, our teacher says, we're all going to do monologues. You know my background. I've just told you that I have this anxiety. And so I remember being terrified, but I could muster up the courage to talk to my teacher and say, please, I just want to go last. Yeah. Thinking that would give me enough time, to like escape
prepare yourself.
Right. Not even prepare myself, but thinking that we would run out of time. We're 25 students. There's not going to be enough time for us all to do monologues. So I'm going to dip or say I need to use the bathroom, something to escape. There was plenty of time. And in fact, there was like 15 minutes left at the end for me.
Got all that extra time.
And I remember this moment of walking up to the stage and being so terrified. But there was something that happened when I sat down. There was a chair that was placed in the middle of the stage. I sat down and it was like I was free. It was like I could breathe for the first time. And I remember just performing and it was done in such a way that nobody could stop me. And it was liberating. And I remember wrapping it up. I don't even remember what story I told, but there was laughter, there was tears. It was a full-on production. It was a one-woman show. And by the time I was done, my teacher comes to me. Everyone leaves, and the teacher says, stay behind because I want to talk to you. And he looks at me and says, oh, you've done this before. You've done this in your previous school, right? And I say to him, I've never been able to speak like this in public before. And I don't think he believed me in that moment. And so he made it a point. It was his mission to make sure that I was in school production. It was his mission to make sure that I was, there was a space that was created for me to really step in fully into this. And I didn't know that that's what he was trying to do. But now that I look back and I'm like, oh, he had an assignment to make sure that all this was pulled out.
So did something break
yes.
in you in that moment or come upon you or?
That's a good question. I remember sitting down and thinking, you don't have to be yourself. You can be anyone you want to be and fully go there. And so that's how I first started opening up.
You don't have to be yourself in that self-actualized thing of I am a person that cannot do this.
Yes,
I can't talk. That's the thing that broke.
Right.
Yeah.
But what about being a woman who's confident, and stepping into that and that gave me some type of release, So that was that experience. And I remember just coming out of that and thinking, if you were able to do that on stage, then you as Tori, you can speak to your friends. You can voice your opinions, but that it really started, it got the ball rolling essentially. Yeah. And from then on, I was this person that would just never shut up. I was always talking, always voicing my opinions, getting in trouble a lot, because there were times where I needed to keep quiet and I didn't know how to because now I found my voice and you're going to hear it. So, yeah, that was another issue.
This is a learning curve on both sides.
Right, exactly. It's like, where's the balance? And
so how did that kind of compound to now?
Yeah.
With you being here, us having this conversation in Glendale, California, all of that. How did you kind of get here?
Yeah. I remember going all the way through high school and thinking it would be a dream for me to go to Hollywood, go to New York even, be on Broadway and perform. But it just seemed incredulous. It seemed too big. And I'm like, I'm in this tiny country, Kuwait, which is a dot on the map. Nobody knows me. I have no connections. I don't have any family or friends that are doing this thing. I just haven't seen that. And there was not much representation as well. And also growing up in a society where there was so much stigmatism attached to the arts, it wasn't something that was encouraged. I remember the times where I would share to my close friends in school that I wanted to be an actor. They would laugh in my face and say, oh, you can't do that. And then combined with growing up in a Nigerian household, it's the expectation is you're going to be a lawyer, an engineer, a doctor, something in academia. That was the expectation of me. My mom's an incredible doctor, and I felt somewhat that pressure to follow in her footsteps. So it was challenging. But I remember, to make a long story short, I decided to do my undergrad in Kuwait in journalism with a focus on being an investigative journalist. That was what I was working towards, and I was doing that. Had my own TV show on the outside. Everything looked amazing. I got to interview some incredible people that I looked up to, but I wasn't happy because I knew that there was more that God had for me. And I remember one day just praying and saying, Lord, I want to do this. I want to be an actor, but I don't know if this is your will for me. and just sitting in that space. And I remember in my room, it was just silence. And I just sat in that space and I'm like, Lord, I want to hear your perspective. I want to hear your voice on this matter. And I went to sleep and I remember waking up. And when I woke up, all I could remember in my dream was CalArts. And I didn't know what CalArts was. And so I quickly go on Google, type it in, and see that this is an arts conservatory in California. And I think this has to be Jesus because I've never heard of this school before. And when I look into admissions, it showed that there were 3 days left to send in your application. And so I panic because I'm thinking, I have no training in acting. I'm sure the people that are applying for this master's program are, incredibly just equipped and have experience. I don't have any of that. What I have is the high school class that I had in drama, So I call my sister and I say, okay, I just had this dream. I feel like God is saying I need to apply, but I don't know how to do this. I don't even know my left from my right. And my sister was like, you're doing it. And even if it means me helping you, we're going to get this done today. So that day, after waking up and talking to my sister, write down the essay, submit all the materials that were needed, send that in. Make a long story short, they request for me to come in to do an in-person audition in America. And at this point, as I'm getting ready to go in to do an audition, I've never done anything like this before, a live audition. I didn't even know how, is it like an interview? How do I dress? There are all these questions. And I remember on the flight, because the audition was in Chicago, on the flight to Chicago, I was literally just learning my monologue. And I remember thinking, Lord, if this is really where you're sending me to, let your marker be your presence. And I remember in that moment saying that prayer and thinking, those are not even words that I use. It was almost like Jesus praying through me. And the day of the audition, I had 2 other schools that I auditioned for earlier in the day. And then it comes to CalArts. And I remember them welcoming me into the room, and they open the door and I walk in. And as soon as I walk in, I almost fall face forward because the presence of God hits me. And I'm just like, okay, Jesus, I know I pray this, but can you just loosen up a little bit?
Let me do my thing.
Let me do my thing. I need to do this audition. And I did the audition. And essentially after doing that, they offered me, admission there and then. And there were a couple of things that happened in the room that were just incredibly powerful. And I remember even in conversation, it coming up that I'm a Christian, and the head of the acting department was like, I knew you were a Christian, because the atmosphere shifted when you walked in. And that was the foundation that the Lord was essentially just really highlighting. He's like, this is what it's going to look like as you step into this industry, as you go and you pursue this education in acting. This is a foundation. Be bold. Because in that room, he was calling me to be bold for Jesus, to say, hey, the difference is Jesus. This is not me. And being mindful not to take the credit for myself.
Yeah. No lukewarm there.
No lukewarm. Exactly. Literally hearing my mom's voice in the back of my mind saying, be on fire for Jesus, So yeah. And
that's
then
incredible.
Moved out to California. And even moving to California wasn't necessarily the number one dream. The dream was to go to New York and do theater full time. That's what I wanted. And I remember there was even a point where I really had to just say, Lord, I need confirmation. I need you to confirm that you're sending me to California. I know I'm supposed to be in the US, but I don't know if it's California. And I remember in that period of my life, I was working at a play school. And I remember there was just a lot of questions that I had of, should I still be working in this play school? And I remember clearly the Lord saying, I have sent you here to be working in this play school. And there was a day that I was working and teaching, and one of my favorite kids comes in and he has California written across his shirt. And I felt this thing in my spirit just rise up and be like, this is where I'm calling you. But if that was not confirmation enough, this little boy comes to me and says, Miss Tori, my uncle lives in California, and I feel like you'll go to California soon. And I just look at this boy dumbfounded. How is this happening? And I just chuckle and I say, I think I might too. So this is just an example. There have been a lot of events that happened that led me up to where I am today that have just been so miraculous. But if I was to share all of them, we'd be sitting here till tomorrow.
That's incredible. I definitely had not heard maybe even most of those things
Yeah.
of just like those confirmations. Going back just a little bit, when you were back in Kuwait and right, and you
Yes.
had your show and all of that kinds of, you were interviewing people.
Yeah.
Did you? You said you were kind of maybe not empty, but maybe not as fulfilled. You thought there was more.
Yes.
But did you feel like you had a base, you had a thing, and then
Absolutely.
you had to uproot yourself for this theoretical possibility?
Absolutely. 100%. That's how I felt, because there was stability there. I was getting paid really well. I had established a name for myself there. To get in, to have your show is not something that's common at all.
Yeah.
A woman, a Black woman, someone who's not a Kuwaiti to be hosting a show, that's unheard of, you know? So I was aware of all these sequence of events that happened for me to have that. But also at the same time, I realized that I had reached my ceiling in a country where I knew that there was so much more that was made available and was accessible to me if I left.
Was there pain in letting that go? Or was that
100%.
what did that
Yeah.
what was that like?
It was, Caleb, it was hard. Hence me coming to Jesus several times, be like, Lord, I need you to confirm that this is what you're calling me to. Because I knew I had gotten in, and I knew that there was just a lot of favor that I had with the people that I worked with and with the executives that I would have to report to. And I knew that leaving Kuwait, that's all I knew. And a lot of people that I grew up with in Kuwait, we always refer to Kuwait as a bubble. You know, it is incredibly different from the Western society. And I knew that that was going to be incredibly difficult for me to also adjust moving to a place like California as well. So it wasn't just uprooting myself from a stable job, a job where there were so many perks, but it was also knowing that I would get to a place where I knew nobody, had no contacts. And something that I would hear a lot with people in the industry and through interviews was like, you know, I knew this person helped me. And I'm like, I don't know anyone. But every single time that thought would come to my mind, the Lord would remind me, he said, I called you. And that's all that matters. And another thing too was I didn't have any training, like formal training prior. And the Lord is like, you don't need that to qualify you.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like, I'm the one that calls you, and that's all. That's all that I ask is for your yes. So each time these thoughts would come up, I would literally hear the Father invite me into this space to say yes.
Yeah.
Yes to his promises. Yes to those visions that he showed me that just seemed beyond belief. I'm like, Lord, I don't know. I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't know how I'm going to survive. I don't know how I'm going to pay rent. But I say yes. You know, there are so many questions, but I choose to say yes.
Yeah. Man, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, my story of moving from the middle of nowhere, Kansas, just halfway across the country.
Yeah.
A similar thing as far as I didn't know anyone. I heard God's call and I did my thing and I whatever. But like I can only imagine moving from a complete a country halfway across the world on just with the call of God, basically to push you forward, to leave your home, to leave that bubble, to leave a good paying job. I didn't leave a good paying job. That was not the thing that was holding me back, but to leave all of that and to come here just because God told you.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that you did.
Yeah. You know, something that I'm reminded of is even in preparation to move to California, a question that the Lord kept asking me was, do you believe that my word is enough? And I don't think I fully understand the weight of that question until I moved here. Because when I came, I was like, oh, this is what it is. This is hard. And that question would come up. Do you believe my word is enough? And the reason I bring that up is because I still find myself in that place of asking myself that question, do you believe my word is enough? What was the last thing he spoke to me? Do you believe that is enough to hold you through this season? And every time it's proved to be sufficient. It's proved to be like an anchor for me in those moments where I just feel like I'm barely making it. I remind myself of his word. You said this. And Lord, you never come back on your promises. You're not a man that you should lie.
Yeah.
And so I speak this word over myself. And every single time that I do that, even times where I don't feel it and my emotions are saying complete opposite, this is your word. And your word is truth.
Recently I had a conversation with, I think it might have been Sarah, but we were chatting and she reminded me, she was like, go back and like look at those words, those things that you've written down. Go back and look at those things. Remind yourself what God said. Audio messages, whatever that may look like. Encourage text messages from friends. Go back and look at those things to remind yourself where you've come from, what you've been doing. And I did that recently, and I remember when I moved from Kansas to LA, the big driving force, one of those words from God that stuck in my mind was go set roots. I just remember hearing that so clearly, go set roots. And that was kind of like that thing that I held close to my chest. Of this is why I'm going. Now I had a lot of other things that I was figuring out and dealing with, and a lot of trust between God and I, and figuring that out, and still figuring it out to this day. But I realized that I had been holding on to that. This is going in a slightly different direction, but I was holding on to that, but I had never asked God, what's next? Too. I felt myself holding on to that one thing that he said 6 years ago. And that was a great thing. And you need those for certain seasons and stuff like that. But as a continuation of that, I found myself reflecting on, I'd never asked again. Really. Like, what's more?
Right.
What's after? Lord, should I be doing anything else? What is next? That kind of thing. And I'm wondering, for you, like, you've had those words. Obviously, there are ones that are eternal, that you will carry till the end. But I think there are seasonal things too.
Absolutely.
Seasonal words. That it's also good to check in on. And be like, God, is this still what you are saying?
Right.
Do I still hold to this? Have you found in your journey through that, has that shifted? Have you gotten new things? Because I know there's a crazy amount of shifting that's happening right now, just for so many people, industry or not. Have you found, coming back to those words and asking for something new that God will often, like, what has that experience been like for you?
Absolutely. And thank you for asking that, because I remember my first 2 years, I really struggled because I felt like I wasn't hearing. And I'm like, is it that I am unable to hear you anymore? And I remember there was a week where it was incredibly busy. I was incredibly stressed. I was doing a production, and I just felt this audible voice of the Lord say, quieten yourself. Just quieten yourself. And so I remember there was a day where I just had to dedicate to just being silent, to hear what the Father was saying. I didn't realize that with the busyness of everything, I wasn't able to really get still to hear what he was speaking to me. And I needed something new. I needed something fresh for that season. And I remember getting quiet, and I was in my dorm room. I remember just saying, I'm just going to stay in this room, Lord, and I'm going to stay until you speak to me. And that's what happened. And there was so much that he spoke to me. But it was this reminder of continue to make this a practice. Moments in your day where you can just get still to hear what I'm saying, because I'm constantly speaking to you. And I remember the word that he spoke to me in that time, it was literally, it felt like a blueprint, and it was with specific strategy as to how to navigate some of the things that I was really struggling with, some questions that I just didn't have answers to. And And that really it set up this light bulb in my mind of God is wanting to speak to us. He's wanting to make provision. He's wanting to provide us with words for the circumstances, the things that we're going through. But are we actually making that time? Are we being still? And sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm being silent, I'm being still, and I'm making time, and I'm doing my practice, but it's just, what is the posture of your heart, you know? So that was something that he highlighted for me, and even now with the strike that's happening, the writer's strike, SAG is now on strike. I've had to, when I saw and I heard all the rumbling of this happening, I went to the Father and I said, okay, Lord, what are you speaking for this particular situation, and how can I partner with you? And he revealed a number of things, but one of the things that he highlighted for me personally was, I want you to posture yourself to be encouragement to those around you, to those people that I have just really highlighted that are in the industry, and just be an encouragement, just be a listening ear for them, and also something that he made very clear to me was, protect your heart. Do not allow the fear of other people, of just the conversations and the talks about AI and all these things. Don't let that get into your heart. Protect your heart.
Yeah.
And I remember it was like a week before they were talking about the strike happening, just really setting in my spirit and saying, I'm not going to allow this discourage me, because I move and operate under the kingdom of heaven. So yes, this is happening, but I speak and I declare that this is not going to affect my work. This is not going to affect the things that I currently have my hands on. And that has been the case for me right now. I feel like in more ways, I'm doing more work now in this strike. I'm getting jobs that are better paying now during this strike. But I personally believe that came from a place of saying, I'm going to protect my heart. And I'm going to stand on the promise and the word that God gave me, and that is what I speak into the atmosphere as well, standing in that authority, and saying that this is not going to be my portion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not being afraid of that change or
Exactly.
that shift.
Exactly.
Because it may look very different.
Yes. Yes.
But different does not mean bad.
That's right. That's right. That's
Different
right.
means different.
Yes.
I think we sometimes conflate those two with each other, set in our ways or whatnot.
Yeah.
One of the things that you do, even here for the church community and stuff, is you run just a group for industry people.
Yeah.
And you also, I know how much of a testament you are to the people around you as you're just doing your thing. But yeah, how have you, in those conversations, in those encouragements, like, have you seen God moving in those areas?
Yeah.
Just how has that been for you? Because I know, you are such an encouragement to the people around you. You do so much.
Yeah.
And again, it's another one of those things I'm so glad that all the circumstances happened to get you here. Because you are salt, you are light to a lot of people in your day to day. And that's, some of what I wanted to talk to you about too, is just being a person of faith in this industry can be a little crazy.
Oh, yeah.
It can be difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'd love to hear just your insights around that. How can be, I don't know if we should start, how can we be more active in that, inside and out?
Yeah.
Just what have you kind of seen?
I think just the way you were talking about different, sometimes we think different is like, this is very, very uncomfortable, but that's where I found myself now, in that different, especially with community and in this group that we get to just talk about some really, really incredible topics, and really in relation to the entertainment industry. Something that has really been highlighted to me is getting to the basics of hearing the voice of God. So it's looked like conversations of, what are the different ways in which God speaks to us? And I find that a lot of my friends, a lot of people that I've met that are in the industry that are Christians, are not aware of the different ways that God speaks. So it's like, okay, let's just go back a little bit and let's figure this out. How does he speak to me? And something that I've been doing in our entertainment nights group is prophetic activations. And basically what that's looked like is, let's just get quiet for a moment and let's hear from God for our partner. And one of the last activities that we did was just ask the Lord for a game that he wants to play with your partner, the person that you're paired up with. What game do you feel like he's showing you? And ask him why that game. And there's something about approaching it that way that is relaxed, that is not this thing of, oh, this is really intimidating, and just getting quiet and saying, okay, Lord, what game? Why do you want to play this game? And there's so much joy that was released in this space. Especially the thing that was incredibly significant, there were people who came to me after and had shared with me their struggles of not being able to hear God. And in that activity, finding that, oh, he speaks to me more through pictures, or he speaks to me through like just impressions, and that was beautiful. And then building off of that, okay, let's do another prophetic activation. But it's all about getting in tune with the voice of God. How does he speak to you? And reminding them, hey, you all heard from God today for your partner. And it was beautiful to see just the way in which people responded to that activity. Like, oh my goodness, like there's no way you could have known that. And this relates to me in my current situation. And that in itself brings about encouragement in the room of, okay, I hear from my Father. So let me hear about what he's speaking to me directly. So it's looked like getting to the basics. Another thing that the Lord has really been highlighting to me is just be honest about what you're going through. I think growing up in the church, something that was really emphasized for me was the appearance, the way in which you behave, being a pastor's kid. There was a certain way in which I had to carry myself. There was a way in which I related to people. And that has followed me throughout my faith journey. And I now in this place where the Lord is like chipping at that. He's like, this is presentational. And he's like, let's be real.
Take the mask off.
Take the mask off. Let's be real. There are issues that you're struggling with, and there are things that you're afraid to talk about for the fear of judgment, for the fear of how people are going to look at you. Are they going to see me differently? Because I struggle with this. And so now I find myself in spaces where the Lord is like pushing me to be vulnerable in a way that I never would be. I always thought I was vulnerable, but he's like, you're vulnerable in this area, but what about this area that you're struggling with? Can you talk about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm reminded of something I thought I've been thinking on a little bit, where I realized that for a long time I've been operating in a way that is obsessed with being okay.
Yeah.
And feeling that through fault or no fault of its own, I feel like sometimes the church can give that air or give that impression that that's what you need to be, when that is not at all how God operates.
Exactly.
Hona was just sharing in his episode, they talked a little bit about that, of like, God is not afraid of honesty.
Yes.
And if you're mad at him, if you're like sad, if you're discouraged, if you are at the end of yourself, that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay to admit it.
That's right.
You don't have to act like you show up to church and everybody asks how you are, and I'm good. I'm good. You and I have done that a lot.
Yes.
Where you'll like walk up to me and you'll give me a hug, and I'm like, how are you? And you're like, and I'm like, okay, how are you?
Right.
And then we'll talk about it.
Yes. And I have such value for that, for moments where we would just ask each other how you're doing, and you'd be like, no, how are you really doing?
Yeah.
Because that further pushed me into this space where it's like, it's okay. It's okay to let those walls down. And especially if those walls have been up for pretty much all your life, it's hard. Yeah. And I know for me, on my part, there was a lot of resistance, and especially, and I think for me, the area of disconnect was, I didn't really see this modeled in the church growing up, of people just being honest. Just honest about what they're going through. It was always this thing of presentation and especially in the leadership of this is just how you carry yourself. And so that was my disconnect. I'm not seeing this modeled around me, and I'm so thankful for Expression 58, for our pastors, Pastor Jen and Pastor Hona, and just how they invite us into their walk, invite us into their journey that is unfiltered, that is real, because for me, I could look at that and say, I want that. That's what I want, because that is a reflection of Christ, you know? So that's something that he's been highlighting. Allow people into your journey. And it's not the cliche, I want to invite you into my journey. No, let them see it all. It's just like I think to myself when I invite people into my space, into my apartment, the rooms that are messy, those doors are closed. You're not going to see those doors, But then there's a friend of mine that I'm just so close to. And recently, whenever she comes over, I'm like, I don't have to close those doors. It's just like, this room is a mess and it's okay right now.
Right.
I will get to it.
That's me.
Exactly. But that is where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
It's okay for that door to be open and for you to see.
Yeah.
And not only for you to see, for you to come in and to speak truth to me from that place as well.
Yeah. Pick up all those clothes.
Pick up all those clothes. Pick up all those clothes with me. Help me clean it up. Let's do this together.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I've that's really, really been highlighted for me. So many things. But the value of community, the value of walking alongside people that God has put in your life that you trust, people that look different from you. There is a friend of mine, and I remember at the very beginning of our relationship, just really struggling because I'm like, this person is so different from me. They see things differently. I don't agree on certain things. But Lord's like, I call them to be in your life for that very reason. Stop moving towards those echo chambers.
Perspective.
Yes, yes. And it's like this opening that it's happening, And it's like, what does that look like to walk alongside people that he's called you to walk alongside with that look different from you, that see the world differently from the way you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of taking that, I want to like try and relate it back to kind of our discussion around, it doesn't necessarily have to be industry specific, but is that how you would encourage, or I guess I'll ask, how would you encourage somebody who is going through a season of complete shift and uncertainty and with related to the craziness that is going on or something completely different, but just how would you encourage them in that walk? Would it be kind of through that, just be honest, be honest, find community, because I know it's just, things have been people have been thrown into a loop. And even like to the point of like questioning whether or not they should be here right now. So is there anything you can do to speak to that?
Absolutely.
To where there's this uncomfortability, there is discomfort, uncertainty, but whether or not that means stay or go or shift or change, I think that's hard, but that does come through communication. So what?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. I think there's so much uncomfortability in the industry. There are so many times where I just find myself like constantly shifting and constantly waiting. As an actor, you do your auditions and you're constantly waiting for a response. Sometimes you never hear back. And it's interesting that you asked this because this is a conversation that I've just been having with a number of my friends. And something that I have gone back to is, what is the last word that God spoke to you? Go back to that. Another thing that I've been also really, really reminded of through community and just Holy Spirit is, what is he asking you to do right now? I think for me, there was a real struggle with that. I would hear this in the church a lot. What is God asking you to do now? But I didn't really connect the dots. And something that he's been highlighting for me is ministry. And what does it look like to really study my word? Like really get deep in my word. That is what I'm calling you. That's one of the things that he's calling me to do now. But as I've been obedient in that area, I've seen all these other things in relation to my work, in relation to acting, in relation to the industry that have been lining up for me, just in obedience in this area. So that's something that I really have been just sharing with my friends. What is God asking you to do now? And maybe you may not know what that is, but what does it look like to carve out time to just say, okay, Lord, I'm tired. I don't know what my next step is, but what do you want of me to do now? And it can be very simple. A lot of times it's very simple.
Yeah.
That has been my experience.
Yeah. That's that honesty right there. Yeah, I can even apply that to myself too. I mean, that kind of hit me when you said that because, thinking of I moved to LA because I wanted to be a director. Yeah. And that's what I had no idea what a director was. It was this Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese guy who points around, and that's what I wanted to be. And I didn't know what that meant. Yeah. Like 3/4 of directing is like pitches and like putting together PDFs of like anyways. Yeah. I didn't know that. But also even in this season, like maybe that's there. Maybe that's one of those words of like that was a call of God on my life to be a director. But what is God calling me to do now in this moment? Yeah. And that might not be being a Martin Scorsese. That's like I'm not there. Yes. And so taking inventory and just looking and saying, what in this time and place, what are you calling me to do? If that's to make this podcast, if that's to do this thing, even if it's not, if that's to get quiet. Yeah. I was just talking with Joel and he shared the story of Christina and Christian Gonzalez Ho, who are friends of the church and stuff. Yeah. They did a course on called Culture Shock a few years ago. And she has another podcast where she was talking about how they launched their careers and they made this book and everything was going well. And then God told them to stop working. Wow. At the height of like their takeoff, they just told them to move away and stop working. Yeah. And it's like, what do you do with that? Right. It's just like, but ultimately, like it's leading somewhere. Yes. It is going somewhere. Yes. So if that I'm encouraged that, I would say be encouraged. Even if that is, hey, not really going to be pursuing that big, it's still there. Yeah. But I need you to focus on this now. That is leading you towards your destination. That's right. That is not a backward step. Yes. That is not an offshoot that won't mean anything. That is developing you further towards your goal. It's all a setup. Yeah. He's setting us up for the next. Yeah. It's like just the story that I mentioned of working at this play school. I knew that was what God was calling me to do then, even though I didn't want to. But through that, as I was diligent and obedient in that, he has this kid that comes up with a California and says, what he says, how does that happen? And that's something that he's been reminding of. Remember the times you were obedient to what I called you to do in that season and how I showed up in that place. Even though there were times where I felt isolated, even though there were times where I'm like, you're just calling me to be silent and to be hidden. But I'm trying to, be on Broadway. It's really annoying, God.
Really annoying. But he was building character there. There were certain things that needed to be put in check quickly.
Sometimes I hate character.
Listen, you can say that again. Put in check quickly because if those things were not dealt with, I would be struggling where I'm at right now. So that's the encouragement that I wanted to share. It's what does that look like now?
Yeah. That's huge. I think, I mean, I want to keep talking. I really do. I think there's more that we could go into. But I think to kind of wrap things up, I want to ask, what are kind of the one or two, or what are the things that you really do want people to kind of, in this conversation, just kind of leave with or ponder? Either whether that's steps to take or a new concept to think about. What's something you want people to leave with?
Two things. The first thing is allow people into your faith journey. And when I say this, let me break this down. I think the biggest question that I get asked a lot by Christians who are in the entertainment industry is, how do you go about talking to people about your faith on set? What does that look like? And my experience has been going back to honesty. There are times where I'm on set where the Lord is like, I just want you to share with this person this thing that you're believing I'm going to do. This thing that seems impossible, share it with them. And so in conversations, when they talk about various different things, I nervously will say, you know what? Yes, this is hard, but I'm praying and I'm believing that God is going to do this. And there's something that I found is released every time I do that as an act of faith. Something that I have seen for me, it's almost like there's an acceleration that happens in that place. I remember there have been times where I've shared things with people and I've been so scared to share it. But the minute I share it, they look at me and they're like, yeah, that's not going to happen. But it does. And when it does happen, I go back to them and say, hey, this happened.
And that's testimony.
Like, and that's my testimony. And they're like, oh, I remember when you made this comment. And I'm like, yeah, I was praying about it. And so that opens up this space now. And so something that I've seen is people on set know me as this woman who prays, and when I pray, things get answered. And it's fine. I laugh about it. But what that's fostered is this what that's fostered and ignited is this hunger. Whatever that is that you're doing, I want some of that because I need that in this industry. And it's now become this thing where when I find myself on set, they're like, oh, that's a girl that prays. Like, you said that you need help with that? Go to her. She's going to pray for you.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened. People coming in saying, remember when you shared that? And I literally see you walking in that. I remember in Kuwait, there were friends that I shared. I said, I'm going to go to California. And my dream is going to be on a TV show. And that's something that I'm praying for. And I remember, I always say that's my dream. And the Lord is like, no, be bold, be bold. And I would say, I'm praying and I believe that God is going to move. And the Lord's like, no, be bold. I believe that Jesus is going to move. And there are times where honestly, I would say, and I feel like a fool. But those same people that I shared that with are now sending me messages saying, I remember when you prayed. And there were times where the Lord was like, be bold, be even more bold, pray right now.
Yeah. Or I just watched that episode that you were in.
That is literally what's happening.
Yeah.
I just watched this episode in Kuwait of you performing.
Yeah.
I remember when you said that God was going to do this for you. Can you pray for me? But that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't honest, if I wasn't bold, if I didn't step out and share my faith journey with them of, hey, this is where I'm at. And I'm believing God to move in this way. I'm believing for that series regular. That's me being bold right now. I'm believing for this series regular. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I believe my God's going to do it. And that's what I'm praying for right now. And that's scary sometimes, but God's going to do it because he's promised me that. So that's one thing that I've just seen to be so fruitful. Another thing that has been new to me is celebrating as an act of faith. Coming to him with things. He says, enter my courts with thanksgiving. There was this event that I attended not too long ago, and it was this live performance, this woman that I've been following for a long time. And as she was performing, I felt the Holy Spirit say, I want you to get a cake this week with candles, and I want you to blow out those candles as an act of faith for these things that you're believing. And I remember thinking, what? Get a cake, blow out candles, not my birthday, But I felt that so strongly in my spirit. And then me and my friend were leaving the concert. We're leaving like towards the end because we're trying to avoid like the crowd and everything. And my friend says she wants to stop at the restroom. So I wait for her outside the restroom. And I remember just standing there and being like, is this something that I thought up? Okay, Lord, a cake. And as I'm standing outside the bathroom, this person wheels out this cart. And what is on the cart? A cake. The same exact cake that the Lord showed me a few minutes prior. In that moment, I'm like, okay, Jesus, let's do this. The way in which I got that cake expeditiously, I was not playing. Got that cake, and not only that, I also invited my friends into that faith journey. Mm-hmm. And I said, hey, this is what God showed me. Let's get together on this day of the week, and I'm going to get a cake, and we're all going to do this. And that's what we did. And the testimonies that have come out of that have been incredible. I remember the top 3 things that I was praying for, the Lord has already answered. But there was that act of faith that needed to be done of, hey,
the first step.
That first step.
Yeah.
You know, what are those physical things that we can do to partner with what he's spoken over us. One more thing that I want to share, a testimony that I'm just reminded of. When I moved to California, I graduated, and I remember praying for a network job. And I remember people all around me were saying, it's going to take you 2 years, 3 years to break into the industry. You're an international. You're new to America. Give it some time. Get acquainted to the industry. But I was like, that is not for me, because I know what God has spoken to me. And I feel in my spirit that there's something that physically needs to be done to partner with the word that God gave me. And I remember getting on my knees and saying, Lord, what does this physical look like? And I remember him clearly saying to me, I want you to go to Warner Brothers and walk around the studios and just pray. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I can do that. And so I kid you not, for 2 weeks straight, I would go to Warner Brothers and walk around and just pray, just speak in tongues, because I didn't really know what to pray. But I'm like, Lord, you told me to pray, so I'm going to do this. Mm-hmm. I did not know that a few months later, I would book the job that I'm currently on that films inside the Warner Brothers studio. The same place I walked around.
This is your little Jericho.
That was my little Jericho. Yeah. So I just want to encourage people watching, people listening. What is that? What does that physical partnership look like? Mm-hmm. As an extension of, hey, I'm believing you, Jesus. Mm-hmm. I believe you're going to move for me.
Yeah.
You know, there are times in which I've literally had to take my wallet and pray and say, Lord, this is my physical act of faith. I'm believing you for breakthrough. Mm-hmm. You know, what does that look like? And sometimes, a lot of times, it's just simple.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing. I'm definitely going to be looking out for cakes on little trolleys coming out. We can pray for more of that. But thank you so much for
my pleasure.
Just coming on here and sharing your wisdom and sharing your story, really.
My pleasure.
This was great. I hope to do more.
Yes, me too.
Would love to continue. But thank you, Tori.
Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the LCJ podcast. We hope that this conversation blessed you. If you want to know more, please look in the description for more links and follow the Expression 58 socials to keep up to date on what we're doing. If you'd like to support the creation of this podcast, please consider donating. Visit expression58.org/podcasts for more information. We'll see you next time.